Whose land is this? The Huron of Wendat were the northernmost of Iroquois peoples, who, in the 17th century, inhabited the area between Lake Simcoe and Georgian Bay, known historically as Wendake, or Huronia. Hurons means boar's head. It was a name given by the French resembling the Huron men's hairstyle. However, their name for themselves, Wendat, means islanders, or dwellers on a peninsula. They comprise of highly organized, independent Iroquois tribes. The Hurons of Wendake were first introduced to the French in the 17th century. They formed a trade and military alliance, and together would show their alliance by raiding their enemies, the Haudenosaunee. The Huron Wendat would take in the missionaries from the French, and eventually the Catholic priests would ask the Huron Wendat to consider marriages between them and the French. The Huron Wendat was the best supplier for fur to the French. There would be about 500 men from their villages working with the fur and the trade network to the French. The Wendat hoped for aid from after the pandemic happened in the 1640s. They were too scared to cut all ties with the French. The Haudenosaunee came back with fury after the pandemic and the raid that the Huron Wendat formed. They wanted to take over the Huron Wendat and be one with them all. After the raid from the Iroquois, there were only very little of the Huron Wendat left. The French forced whoever was left with the Huron Wendat to go with their enemies and join them, the Iroquois. Eventually, the ones who never joined the Iroquois fled to the U.S. and got their English name, Wyandot, which is improper to the Wendat. When the Europeans were setting out for New France, Samuel de Champlain and the French met with Huron Wendat in 1615 while going down the St. Lawrence River. The French used contact to gain a strong relationship with the Wendake, and the French worked together. The French would leave missionaries with the tribe to learn about their culture, their way of living. And then eventually, a trade deal was made between the two. The French would receive beaver pelts in exchange for money and military aid. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Huron Wendat grew significant amounts of corn and tobacco and used the surplus of trade on a large scale with the Amerindian nations in the area around Georgian Bay, Ontario. There are approximately 4,000 members in the Huron Wendat Nation, which was founded in 1967, and is one of the most urbanized and prosperous Indigenous nations in Quebec, becoming a neighboring municipality to the city. Wendake Société de Développement Économique provides expertise to some 60 local companies that provide employment for both Huron Wendat and many non-Indigenous people. Today, Wendake comprises a newly developed historic sector, a residential district, and an industrial zone. Tourism is an important economic factor for them. The Hotel Musée de Première Nation opened in 2008 and was very successful thanks to its architecture and quality of services offered. Weakened by diseases, notably smallpox, influenza, and measles, introduced by Europeans, and unable to maintain as many firearms as much ammunition as their enemies, the Wendat Confederacy was defeated by the Iroquois Confederacy in 1648 to 1650, and the constituent tribes were dispersed. In the 1640s, after the epidemics had taken a toll on the Aboriginals, tribes decided to push more of the one nation from their ancient ideal. In 1662, the Iroquois started to attack villages to make their ideal of one nation a reality. These attacks went on for 5 years. 2 years later, it got worse for the people of Huron Wendat. With the support of the Dutch through their weapons, the Iroquois were able to disperse them from their land in just 2 years. These wars, mixed with the epidemic, took a very large toll on their population. During and after the war with the Iroquois, it is believed that at least 3,000 people left the Huron Wendat and joined the Iroquois. The Wendat Confederacy was reaffirmed in 1999 with a document signed by the 4 constituent members of the Confederacy: the Huron Wendat of Wendake in Quebec, Canada, the Wyandot Nation of Oklahoma, the Wyandot Nation of Kansas, and the Wyandot of Anderdon Nation in Michigan, U.S. In the early 21st century, population estimates indicate some 3,500 Wendat descendants.